All right, everybody, what's up? Welcome back. It's been about a week since my last video. Not really, it's Tuesday. I uploaded that. It's been like 4 or 5 days. And the video I've been kind of hesitating to make is this one, which is about kind of reviewing my gear choices and what my thoughts are post-vacation in Nevis. Now, if you've been following this channel long enough, you know that I suffer from incurable gas, and I've just learned to adopt that. Just say, I own that, it's mine. But specifically, trips always caused gas. For example, before a trip, I'll think about all the different scenarios I should be in. And that's why I made a couple of those videos for you guys before I went to Nevis, because I wanted to share kind of some of like the mindset that I've had in the past. And I thought that's kind of fun because I'm sure a lot of you guys go through that. And I think about all the things that I could do or would want to do. And you know, it's always a fight between like a capable kit and a smaller kit, and having one zoom lens, but not having a fast enough aperture, and then shooting with primes because primes help me. It's crazy. It's pure insanity. And then always post-trip, I have this epiphany, this realization that, oh my gosh, I was so stupid. I could have just gone on this trip with just one lens and simplified things and enjoyed things more. And that usually causes gas as well, because then I'll like sell everything and buy something else. And then the cycle restarts. It's part of the gas cycle. I've made a video a long time ago about this. It's part of the gas cycle. And so specifically, I want to talk about my experience on this trip, because I did something different this time where I bought a big camera with me, this Leica SL2-S, which I'm recording you on now, and I bought 3 primes with me. And I want to give you my feedback on that. I also brought the Ricoh GR3 with me as well, because that was like the antithesis, the complete opposite of the Leica SL2-S. And so this video might go around in circles. I'm going to do this as a one-take wonder like I always do, but kind of give you guys some of my thoughts and feedback initially on everything. And so let's kind of break this down by different cameras and setups. I'll break it into segments. Okay, the very first segment is the 3 prime scenario. So I brought with me the Sigma 24 f2, the Leica 50mm SL f2, the Summicron, and then also the Sigma 90mm f2.8. Now, what I like about these Sigma primes is that they have the aperture rings on them, because the Leica SL2-S only has a front wheel and then a back wheel, which is only 2 parts of the exposure triangle. The third part is relegated to an aperture ring on the lens if you have it. But the Leica SL2-S, the 50 Summicron that comes with it, does not have an aperture ring. And so I like the Sigmas for that. The way you would do it in that case is that there's a button on top you hit and scroll your ISO, kind of like they do with Nikon or even the new Fuji X-H2S, that you hold the button and scroll. Anyways, the prime scenario was a mixed bag. So the zoom lens I have, which I'm recording you on now, is the Sigma 28 to 70 f2.8. It's a small zoom lens. The benefit of bringing the primes was that 24, which is my prime, is way wider than 28. And that worked out really, really well, because there are some scenarios where I think 24 was a differentiator and just wide enough where it made a big difference. The 50mm f2 Summicron, I don't know if there'd be a big difference between 50 f2 on that prime versus 50 f2.8 on the zoom. Probably could have taken or leaving that, to be honest with you. So I don't know if that was a necessity. But then there's the 90 f2.8 on the long side. And similarly, as 24 versus 28, there's a big difference between 70 and 90. 70 being the long end of this zoom versus 90 on the prime. And so there are many times where the 90 came in handy, where I was shooting the monkeys in some of those pictures. And even then I had to crop considerably. And so I think that was important. With all that being said, changing lenses did get annoying, I'll be honest with you. And I found, because it's in such a sunny, bright, beautiful place, that shooting wide open was only really necessary for depth of field control, which wasn't really necessary at all, except for a few instances where I was maybe in a crowd and I wanted to separate one person. But that was a far and few between scenario. I was mostly shooting landscapes or isolated enough, or the background was far enough where f2 versus f2.8 versus f4 would not have made a big difference. And so that leads me to the next thing, a zoom lens. I think in the end, the 28 to 70 would have been a better choice, because it was an all-in-one package. 28 versus 24, yes, it's a significant difference, but I think I could have made 28 work. 70 versus 90, that might be a bit of a different story. but I probably still could have made that work too, to be honest with you guys. I think if I were to go back and pick a lens all over again, it would probably be something like a 24-105 or a 24-120. That would have been the perfect zoom lens, an f4. I don't know if L-mount they have a 24-120 f4 like they do for Nikon. That's a superb lens for Nikon, by the way. But the 24-105 lens that they've had for Panasonic for a long time, which is like a pseudo macro as well, probably would have been a better or a good option. I think Sigma has one of those lenses as well. And so in hindsight, I think that's better. So in terms of like prime versus zoom, that's where I ended up. Okay, so now let's talk about the camera body itself. I think I was spot on in my assessment that if you're gonna carry a bigger camera, that in reality, the Leica SL, SL2, SL2-S has a reputation for being a big, heavy camera, and it is. But the reality is when you bolt lenses onto these camera systems, it's not much different than the Sony a7 IV or the R6 Mark II or the Z6 Mark II or any of those. Yes, the camera bodies are smaller, but when you put the lenses on, it's insignificant, to be honest with you. And so I think what's more important is finding a smaller compact zoom lens to put on those bodies as opposed to trying to shrink your body down and having big lenses on there. And so I think in hindsight, I would have preferred a bigger or longer zoom lens and continued with the body that I had. And so with that, I want to talk to you about the body in more detail. The Leica SL2-S to me it's an interesting thing. I had it once before, I returned it to Leica, and then I bought it again with the 50mm Summicron. And I love this camera more than any other camera I've ever used, and I despise it in a couple ways. The EVF is the best EVF I've ever used in my life. Bar down, I've used a bunch of them. I've looked through the Z6, Z7s, I've looked through the R6, R6 II, I've looked for the Sony a7 IV. I even looked through the a7 R5, which I think is probably close. The OM1 was pretty good. And I would say that this viewfinder bests them all. It's a high megapixel count or a high resolution count. It's got really good glass in front of the EVF, and it's a big magnification. And I like the circular eye cup versus like the kind of the more oval eye cup. And it just, to me, it's really a pleasant experience to look through. On top of that, this Leica is built like nothing else. It's only second to the M bodies, to be honest with you. You can tell it's built and machined out of a monoblock of aluminum. It just feels fantastic in your hands. Everything you're holding is either a very premium textured surface or it's a metal surface. The shutter button's metal, the top plate's all metal. It just feels like a tank and it exudes confidence. And last but not least, and probably most importantly, the image quality coming out of this camera is the best I've ever used. Now, I'm not saying it's the highest resolution, and I'm not even saying it's the best overall image quality of any camera ever made, but just the DNG files that come out of the camera, put them into Capture One, and the amount of latitude and the colors I got, in my opinion, were absolutely fantastic. Now, you may agree or may disagree, but if you go back through my photos for that video, that 30-minute talking head piece I did, I really think that the colors were fantastic in there. And I think Capture One interprets those files fantastically. There was no weirdness going on, no like the dynamic range, the recovery was insane, the ISO noise is like non-existent. And when you consider all of these things, it makes the price tag for this SL2-S not that bad. In fact, the 50mm Summicron SL lens, which they say is kind of a premium rebadged 50mm f1.8 Lumix lens, combined with this SL2-S is like $4,000 something. If you take the retail price of that SL50 out of it, the camera ends up being sub $3,000, and it fits right into there with other premium camera brand, their middle of the tier stuff. So it's really not that expensive when you think about it. But there is a negative, and it did bite me a few times. First of all, the camera body is heavy. And if you're gonna carry this every single day, that kind of can get old. Second, the autofocus is subpar, specifically in video. Now, I've learned how to kind of work with it, and I'm using it now. Hopefully, it's not pulsing or doing anything kind of crazy, and I've used it for many of my videos recently. Nobody's complained in the comment section, so there's that. But for changing subjects rapidly, low light, the autofocus in video is terrible. You have to learn how to kind of like half pump the shutter button to force the focus. And when it comes to moving tracking subjects as well, I would say that it doesn't have the best, it's nothing near Sony, Canon, or even newer Nikon or Fuji systems. And so you gotta kind of know how to force it. There were a few shots, like one that I took of the boy riding the wheelie on his bicycle. that I had the focus box off the subject, so I can't blame the camera for that. But I do know from using like the Sony a7 IV that the subject recognition is so good that it would have said, hey, boom, this is a subject, and focus on it, and would have overrode my errant focus point and grabbed the shot. It would have. And candidly, I don't even know if the SL2-S would track that or not. I have to kind of play with it more. And so there's that aspect of it. The second thing is I can even deal with subpar autofocus if I had a flip screen filming myself. I don't. Right now I'm using my phone to kind of monitor what I'm doing, but that's not ideal. And so that's kind of one of the trade-offs. And when you think about the price of everything and the capability, you're like, why wouldn't I just go get a Sony a7 IV or whatever it might be? But the reality is that the other intangibles are so good that it makes it really hard to kind of go back to something like that. This feels like a premium tool in your hands, and some of the other cameras feel like toys. And that's just the way I feel about it. And so overall, carrying the camera itself and using the SL itself was actually a very good experience. I was very happy with the pictures I got. It got heavy and bulky at times. There were sometimes things that were like, I wish it wasn't like that. But to be honest with you, I got all the images I want and probably only missed one or two because of the camera or maybe user error. And so on the flip side of that, I carried my Ricoh GR3, and that was kind of offset this, and let's talk about that for a second. Okay, the Ricoh GR3 I've had several times, and candidly, it's just the best pocket camera that exists today. There is no better option, in my opinion, at least as a modern pocket camera. And when I got tired of carrying the SL around all day, throughout the day in our excursions, I threw it back in the room in my bag, and I grabbed the GR, I threw it in my pocket, and I went and spent time with my wife on the beach, at dinner or whatever, and it was not obtrusive. It wasn't sitting on the table, it wasn't hanging over my shoulder, it was just in my pocket. And many a times, it captured fantastic images. That being said, most of those instances were at night, and the autofocus on the GR3 sucks when it comes to night photography. It just misses. There were a lot of shots that missed in the background. This wasn't a surprise to me. I've had this camera before. I knew it. So there was a trade-off for convenience and you know, in the autofocus a little bit. The downside of the GR3 is that they don't have flash on this model. The GR2 had it, the GR3 does not. And I think flash would have been a game changer for me a little bit, to be honest with you. I could have, you know, set exposure for the background on some of these sunsets and then shot flash to light up my subject. And there were some portraits I did of some coworkers or some scenarios where I think that would have really helped. And so for me, yes, I think I'll keep the Ricoh GR3 because it is the only pocketable option like that. But it left me with an in-between. And I guess we're going to end up with the conclusion. So, yeah. So in conclusion, you know, where I kind of thought I might have been the best option, to be honest with you, is something like a Fuji X-E3, Fuji X-E4, something like an APS-C sensor where I could have bought one zoom lens and one fast prime with a little EX-F8 or whatever that thing's called on top, flash. Because I think that would have been small enough to keep with me with like the 27-28, which is basically a Ricoh GR3X, in my pocket or on a, you know, some small little sling, even though I don't want to carry a sling, but maybe in my pocket. I could have had that little flash to kind of compensate for that. And it still would have decent video autofocus. It would have had a fast lens for during the day. I could have had a zoom lens on there. I think that probably would have been the best compromise. And so coming out of this, like, what's my gas purchase? It's going to be a small Fuji. I think I'm going to purchase a Fuji X-T30 Mark II. And the reason why is that camera has a built-in flash, unlike the X-E4, where I can throw my 27-2.8 on it, or I can use the 18-55, or I can throw a fast prime. And I think I'm going to keep that as like a secondary option to my SL2-S because I think that's the best kind of in between. It's a cheaper body, it's smaller, it has flash, it has decent autofocus, it has the newer film sims minus nostalgic negative, and you can change lenses on it. I think that might be a great alternative option to carrying a big camera around that's got the best image quality and is built like an absolute tank versus some of the shortcomings of the Ricoh GR3 with the autofocus and the lack of flash. But I think having a GR3, kind of a middle ground Fuji camera, and this bigger SL2-S is probably a good combination. And so that's where I've left it. in the end, I got to tell you guys, the net of everything, that's something we say in sales, the net is I really enjoy just taking photos. And if anything, it kind of helped me with more solidify some of my gas stuff, is that when I'm taking photos, when I'm in a place that's interesting, when I'm pointing my lens, no matter what camera it is, candidly, at something, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy seeing the light. I enjoy trying to figure out images and seeing angles and colors. That's where I'm the happiest. And the gas kind of melts away when I do that. It's times like these where I'm at home and I'm working and I'm watching YouTube videos or talking to friends where the what if gas scenarios play back out. Now for me, I'm going back out to Vegas probably in the next 3 weeks. I will be bringing a camera with me. I don't know what it is, but I'm just gonna enjoy the experience. One to film me and probably one to shoot photos, given I have a chance to go out to the desert again or something like that. Shortly after that, I'll be camping. There's a lot of trips coming out throughout the year, and I think what I'm trying to say is, I hope between the GR, the Fuji, and this SL2-S, I've got all my bases covered where I kind of, as I bounce through my gas cycles, I have an answer sitting on my shelf for every one of those scenarios. And yeah, I just really enjoy it. So I plan on shooting more videos for you guys where I'm out taking photos, showing you more photos post-trip, talking about some of the gear that I have, and kind of approaching it that way. And let's see, I'm at 16 minutes already. So if you made it through this rambling, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Hopefully the autofocus is okay on this Leica SL2-S with the Sigma 28-70 f2.8. And I just really appreciate you guys watching this and following me for my journey. Comment section below on what you guys think about my approach, what you think might have been a better approach, or if you have any ideas, feedback, or whatever it might be. I love reading your comments. It's like candidly why I do this. It's for the community. I don't care about making money or any of that stuff. It's just for you guys. I love sharing this with the people that watch my channel. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.